Welcome back, folks. It's just about 50 minutes past the hour of 6 o'clock. It's a beautiful Tuesday morning in Port of Spain. And we have to continue dealing with some of these critical issues affecting the quality of our carnival product and identify exactly how we can solve some of these problems. So one of the problems that we need to solve is, how do we deal with intellectual property rights? And it appears as though there is this battle brewing with respect to who is responsible for the collection of the fees associated with photography rights, and also ensuring that we collect all the necessary fees for music rights. Well, let's find out. The fees break out as follows. NCC charges for personal use $600, commercial use $800, additional National Carnival Band Leaders Association fees for coverage of costume bands and individuals for personal use $5,900, and for commercial use $10,000. And I suppose permits allow for 2 years of local usage, but we will get some clarification on that. For international commercial usage for UK and Europe, add another $3,500, and for international commercial usage for the US, add $3,000. Well, we have two professionals in studio this morning. Mark Lindsay, he is a freelance photographer, writer, and lecturer. And we also have Andrea De Silva, another freelance photographer from Reuters. Yes. Good morning, folks.
Good morning.
Good morning to you.
So, Andrea, let me start with you. What's the bacchanal all about with respect to these fees associated with photography?
Well, for me personally, it's because Reuters is a news agency, and for ethical reasons, we don't believe in paying. We don't pay to cover any event at all, and I've had to pay to cover Carnival for 2 years, and as of the last 2 years, I had to find other ways of covering the Carnival and giving Trinidad and Tobago's Carnival the exposure which I think it deserves.
So you think these fees are unreasonable, or just having a fee is unethical as far as you're concerned?
Well, not for media, it is unreasonable, I would say. Because for example, when I take photographs for Reuters, and the pictures go up on our wire, and the wire service, our pictures literally go global immediately, you know. And it being a media representative, you know, media as a whole, to me, as for ethical reasons, shouldn't have to pay to cover any event, because when the same bodies hold press conferences and things like that to inform the public as to what's happening, the media are the ones that they invite to put the information out there. And as far as international media is concerned, as Reuters is concerned, the kind of coverage and exposure and free marketing we get for the Carnival, you really can't put a price on something like that.
Well, Mr. Lindsay, thank you for joining us.
You should call me Mark.
Yeah, you should probably call you Mark.
You should.
Before I decimate your surname. What really ought to be the relationship between the media and the organizations that run these festivities? Photography is an art, it is a science, and of course, as Andrea was mentioning, it really is something that the world can see in an instant. So it's important to the marketing of the event and so on, creating awareness and interest in the event. But the essential thing is this: why shouldn't the media pay to take these photographs?
Well, once the media is paying to cover something, it fundamentally changes the relationship as a reporting body between that agency and the body that is producing the event. So it's a different participation entirely from one in which you enter cold and say, okay, fine, this event is happening, we're covering this, we're going to find our own take, and we're reporting this. I think we can trace the problem back to somewhere in the mid-90s, which is when the Works of Mass Clause came fully into effect in Trinidad and Tobago. And I think the critical juncture for it was when the NCBA insisted that anyone publishing a Carnival magazine for sale had to pay them a fee. To my mind, that was the point when it should have been contested, because publishing a Carnival magazine for sale is still an editorial enterprise. It's not strictly speaking a commercial enterprise, and the truth of it is those things don't make money. When Mr. Boyk published his Trinidad Carnival, which was an excellent magazine, that wasn't where he was making his money. He had an advertising agency, he had a homemaker magazine. He was doing it for the reason that we all do it, which is because we love to do it. So that fundamental change of the relationship between the media and Carnival stakeholders just rippled through the thing, and I believe there is a misunderstanding of the application of copyright in this.
Let me try to understand the legal relationships here as far as ownership is concerned. Mm-hmm. When you take a photograph of, say, a section of a band or an individual masquerader, that photograph is the property of whom? Is it you, the freelance photographer? Is it your property? Or is it the property of the agency for which you are actually engaged?
One of the misunderstandings I think we have about copyright is that we think it's one thing. In fact, it's a bundle of rights, and it's actually quite rare for a photograph to have only one true owner. So if I take a photograph, yes, that photograph, that interpretation of the event, that image that I've done, that's mine. But embedded in that picture may be other ancillary neighboring rights. So that, for instance, if there is an identifiable person in the picture, and I want to put that to a certain kind of commercial use that requires that every identifiable person or place within the image be licensed, then I have to contract with those people in order to be able to clear that for that use.
Right. But you would typically sell your photographs to some particular agency, some particular entity. I mean, in other words, how do you get paid for your photographs?
That's an interesting question because, strictly speaking, when it comes to Carnival, I don't really get paid to do my photographs. Mm-hmm. There's some small income that comes from the fact that I have a relationship with a newspaper, The Guardian. Sometimes people license them for books or for publications outside of Trinidad and Tobago. I can do that under an editorial license without referencing people necessarily. Mm-hmm. But once it gets down into any kind of commercial use, I have to engage with the people who are actually in the picture. But the truth of it is there's not a lot of money in this. One of the principles that's at play here is that people think there's all this money to be made, and there isn't. A lot of people who are taking photographs for Carnival are doing it for reasons that have nothing to do with money. They're doing it because they enjoy the festival. They're doing it because they raise their social profile if they're working with a website and people see them taking pictures of pretty girls. They do it for archiving. I have photographed Carnival for many, many years. I keep those pictures on file. They've become a valuable entity unto themselves. The body of work that Noel Norton did, for instance, is a massive archive of Trinidad and Tobago's Carnival. And it was done on a shoestring. He did it because he wanted to do it. He was selling a few prints out of his studio, but that wasn't a ton of money at all. He was doing it because he wanted to do it.
But isn't this it's not so much about the money, but it's the principle of the whole thing, in that if I am a masquerader, and you take a photograph of me in my glory, mm-hmm. And then at some subsequent time, you then sell that image to some agency, some entity, shouldn't you be sharing that income with me?
Depends on the circumstances. The defining point in that is whether or not the use that is being made of the picture is in the public interest. A billboard advertising rum on the highway is not in the public interest. It's in a commercial interest. In a magazine that is doing a story internationally about carnivals around the world, that's definitely in the public interest on a global scale. Andrea's pictures, for instance, get picked up for things like The Big Picture, Boston.com, and that is a survey of carnivals around the world. Do we want to be missing from that? I don't believe we do.
Mm-hmm. Andrea, I wonder sometimes if, all of the stakeholders involved in these festivities truly understand what their rights are, and how do you think we can go about solving these issues beforehand so that we don't have this antagonism, in the pre event era and the post-event era. And so we can really get down to the business of creating the right product and ensuring that the world understands that we are all moving in the same direction as far as this product is concerned. What do we need to do to clarify all of this antagonism?
I think, like Mark said in his article in The Guardian today, there has to be discussion involving all the stakeholders, which includes media, photographers, because we are the ones who give you that visual thing where Carnival is concerned. So when they're planning, when the NCC or the authorities are having their meetings to discuss arrangements for next year, they should have representation from all of us, all the stakeholders, not just NCBA and Pan Trimbago and TUCO. We are also part of it because we are the ones who we register every year. Year by year, and when you want to go back and see what Carnival looked like 10 years ago, we are the ones you would have to come to get those images to see what this band played, and so therefore we should be involved in all the discussions as far as making this a success, and not for us as photographers, but for Trinidad and Tobago Carnival, putting it on that international stage, which for me is so important.
But you know, Mark, the thing that that bothers me as well is the amateur photographer. Now, how do you distinguish between who is the amateur just walking around taking photographs and who is the professional photographer, the professional freelancer? How do you distinguish between the two? Because really and truly, somebody can pose as an amateur and say, well, listen, I am just here to take some photographs and, you know, I don't need a license, I don't need a permit, you know, that kind of thing. How do we really bring greater clarity to this thing is in terms of who's professional and who's amateur?
I think one of the things we really have to pursue is effective partnerships. If there's discussion, if there's collaboration, if people have a mutual understanding of what we're all doing, there's going to be a chance that we're going to be able to pull this together in a meaningful way. The separation between amateur and professional, I think, is a phantom discussion, because I know brilliant amateur photographers. They're never going to sell their pictures anywhere, but they're excellent photographers. I know professionals who are not as skilled. So the real question about it, I think, is that we need to start thinking about what it is we're doing with Carnival coverage. There are people who've already proven over the years that they have a commitment to a certain level of high-quality Carnival coverage. They have a commitment to recording the festival in a meaningful way. You're thinking about people like Abigail Hadid, you're talking about people like Bertrand de Pisa, people who show up every single year, record, photograph, and these are people who should have a partnership role in this exercise. The media houses, the television stations, the broadcasters, all of those recordings are important documents. So if there isn't that partnership, the thing begins to collapse. That's how tapes of carnivals gone by just end up being left to rot. If there was a partnership and a collaboration there, then there would be a sense of, okay, you're not making use of these tapes. Let us see how we can preserve them.
But you know, it brings us to an interesting point, and we're going to take a break and come back. But Andrea, I wanted you just to consider this simple fact. With the advent of the internet and with all of the social media networks and so on that people are utilizing on a daily basis, aren't we already creating an archive on the internet without having to create warehouses of tapes and so on? So can we think about exactly what this archival material really means and whether or not the mechanisms that we're using are archaic in and of themselves? Yeah? We're going to take a break, folks, and when we come back, we're going to deal with some of these pressing issues. Stay with us. 27 minutes before the hour of 7 o'clock, and we have joining us on the telephone Mr. Ricky Rogers, and I believe he's also from Reuters. Good morning, Mr. Rogers.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Mr. Rogers, you are one of the photographers and gatherers of images who is very familiar with what happens in other carnivals around the world. Am I correct?
That's right. We cover Carnival all over Latin America and parts of Europe.
So when it comes to the question of intellectual property rights, as far as images are concerned, how do the agencies who manage those festivals treat with that particular issue?
We have no issues in other carnivals. The Trinidad Carnival is the one where this has just appeared, surfaced as an issue. But in other carnivals, for example, in Brazil, in Rio, the greatest carnival in terms of size and impact worldwide, we have absolutely no issues. We have unlimited credentials, and we've had no rights issues as far as the use of the images. There are issues as far as television goes, but that's a different matter. We at Reuters consider Carnival as a news event, so we apply the same rules as we do when we cover news events, which is that we do not pay for credentials. Because upon paying, excuse me, go ahead.
All right, and let me ask you this. The images that are captured by photographers during these festivities, are those images used for any other purposes other than what they would be put to by Reuters?
We have an archive, a virtual archive, which stores these images, and they are available for purchase. But in the case of a lot of the images, they would be if they contain elements or context that individual persons, there would be a problem with rights control, and in that case, the sales department would deal with that. But we do label a lot of pictures as no commercial use, editorial use only, which means they can be downloaded and purchased by news media, but they would not necessarily be used in advertising campaigns.
Right, but you can sell those images to other news agencies.
Other news agencies, yes, we have third-party agencies which sell Reuters pictures, such as Corvus, which is the largest, and they pay a royalty to Reuters and the photographer.
Now, we're here with Mr. Mark Lindsay and Andrea De Silva. I'm sure you're familiar with these individuals. Mark was talking about ancillary rights. If you're going to sell images that you have captured at these other events, then how do you treat with ancillary rights of the individuals who can be identified, or the bands that can be identified by these images?
Well, we don't have issues with the bans. As far as I know, that in Trinidad now the conflict is with the intellectual rights of what are being considered as intellectual rights over the suits and the carnival dress and all that, and we've never had any issues with that, and especially in Rio, where the creativity is enormous, and in the same way that in Trinidad, we've never had any issues at all about reselling pictures for any other media or any other use.
So your position, Mr. Rogers, is that it is unreasonable for entities such as our National Carnival Band Association or the National Carnival Commission to require licensing fees for photographers to take images of the carnival festivities.
That's correct. That's the way we consider it. We would simply not cover an event where we had to pay for credentials, especially pay such exorbitant fees. We would simply not do it. We have the AP and Reuters and FA and AFP all have an organization called the News Media Coalition, which we have put into effect as a negotiating body when we are faced with such issues, especially in sports. We have managed to change the rules for covering cricket and Rugby World Cups. and we have simply boycotted until we've managed to gain free access.
So in the instances where the governing bodies of these festivities or sporting events have insisted on fees, Reuters' position is that they'll just simply not cover the event.
That's correct.
But I wonder to what... Sorry, go ahead.
No, because just to make it clear, when we pay for an event, for access to an event, it's against the journalistic ethic because we might be considered obliged to report in a certain way if money changes hands, and that's against our independence. So we simply consider it unethical.
Okay. Well, Mr. Rogers, thank you so much for sharing your position on these matters. I think it brings some clarity to the issue, and I certainly do hope you have a safe and enjoyable stay in Miami. Thank you. Well, folks, you heard Mr. Rogers, and I suppose this is the same position, Mark, that you will take. This is the same position, Andrea. Of course, you're part of Reuters. You will take. So then, how do we then treat with the position adopted by these governing bodies like the NCC and the NCBA? Do we tell them, well, look, if you insist on this, then entities like Reuters will simply abandon covering Carnival?
Yes, definitely. I've already decided. If it is that this continues, I definitely will not be covering Carnival next year.
How did you navigate around this obstacle this year?
I prefer not to go into that.
It's a trade secret.
Well, it's definitely in the trade, and it's kind of a secret.
So it's a trade secret. Were you standing on a truck somewhere with a zoom lens?
I was
like a
all over.
paparazzi. Is that a bad
over.
word for media people? Paparazzi? Is that a derogatory
Doesn't
term?
affect me.
It doesn't affect me either.
Okay, great. So you were adopting the strategy of a paparazzi during the carnival season? Is that it?
I was like any other photographer, but I found ways of getting into the venues for the various events, because for me personally, it's I see the importance of.
So what? You had to pay to enter the venues. You had to actually purchase a ticket.
Man, it's probing at
Well,
it,
let's just
boy.
say that I found my way into the venue.
You found your way into the venue?
Yes.
You were storming these venues?
No, I wouldn't say that. I
met a couple of professional stormers, and they gave me some tricks of the trade and so on. You know, you would dress up and as though you were part of the band, or you know, you would be part. You would come in an ambulance kind of thing. Is that
No,
what?
nothing like that.
Nothing
like
as
that, no.
exorbitant.
But there are ways
as
to
that?
do it. You know, where there's a will, there's always a way.
Where
You
there's
know,
a
and to me, there's a great will to put Trinidad and Tobago Carnival out there. So I will, you know, I would use, you know, find a way to get the pictures out there.
Well, while you were navigating around these obstacles, were you harassed in any way by security personnel demanding that you display some badge or
No.
permit or anything of the sort?
No, I had my things properly arranged, so there was no problems for me at all.
So desperately.
Wow, I mean, those are some. Mark, are you aware of these tricks in the trade? Because I think
What I can say from what I know about it is that it was done with the best interests of Trinidad and Tobago's Carnival at heart.
right. And in that regard, Trinidad and Tobago should be very, very grateful that in spite of these obstacles, our carnival will be displayed by Reuters.
I would say that Andrea leapt over the protocol to display common sense solutions.
She was a good hurdler.
She was a good hurdler of an unnecessary hurdle.
So, folks, you do this is your profession. You do this not just in Trinidad and Tobago. There are other carnivals throughout this region. Have you encountered these difficulties in other countries? In Jamaica, Barbados has crop over. The Bahamas, they have Junkanoo. All across the OECS, they have their carnivals at different times of the year. Have you encountered similar difficulties like this, Mark?
Andrea has certainly covered more carnivals throughout the Caribbean, more events throughout the Caribbean than I have. But what I can say for sure is that in most countries, people are actually grateful to see the media and very happy to entertain them to get the kind of coverage that they want.
Exactly.
And there was a time in Trinidad and Tobago that was the case here as well.
But hasn't our carnival grown up and it's no longer a fledgling infant industry?
Yes,
and so now we really don't need that. We really don't need that, you know.
It's a delinquent.
That's what's in our minds.
My producer's asking me to talk to the tweeps. Tweeps, I'm sorry, I sometimes forget. Let me just see what our tweeps are saying. In response to the question that was posed, and the question was, do you believe the media should have to pay to cover any event in Trinidad and Tobago? And one young lady says, no, how else will the public be updated with activities, activities which they can't attend? Leighton Rosa says, they record it and they copy it right for themselves. Leighton, I'm just correcting your grammar there. So they should pay something. You see, some people are saying that you should pay something. Let me see who else. Alana Smith says, our own media of our own country. No, that's just wrong. Kiran says the media already struggles to stay afloat. Lack of sponsorship. Now people want easy money through drastic measures. And I suppose that's the position of our guests this morning. Pounder says, that idea is nonsense. Many events are only known to the public because of the media. It should be thanks for free publicity. Okay, yes. So the promoters of the event should be grateful for the coverage provided by the media. Slim, Sweet, and Sexy says, no, I don't think they should cause the media to pay because the media plays an important role within our society. Okay, so they should not. And Kiran is congratulating you. Kiran says, 2 remarkable photographers and I'm missing the show. Well, Kiran, you can listen to us on 87.7 FM or you can join us on www.tv6tnt.com. I would advise that if you're driving, join us on the radio, not online, of course. Rasta attitude, I like this, Rasta attitude. My question is, do other Caribbean media pay? I think they should not. This is our local news. I would understand if you were reporting TNT then. Okay, I lost you there, some Rasta attitude. All right. So you have, yeah, oh, Dennis raises an interesting point. Dennis says there have been too many abuses of press passes for anyone responsible to even suggest this and so on. So I guess what Dennis is also saying is that to some degree, the members of the media may have misbehaved in the past in terms of how they might have, you know, taken advantage of this media pass, this all access pass and so on. You know, just to get a free fet, you know, you attend a fet, you know, you're going as media, and you just go in and you have a good time, but you're not really covering anything. You come back and say, boy, that Iowa Wednesday was great.
Well, I'm a grown-up.
Exactly, I'm a professional.
I don't need to attend parties using a media pass. But actually, there is a trend among young photographers to actually invent media passes. And that is really an abuse of the media news gathering privilege.
Right. When you say invent, I suspect...
They make up their own pass.
Right. I suspect that's fraud.
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is. I mean, you're using, you know, a very politically correct word, but yeah, that's fraud.
And they're wrapping themselves in the shroud of news gathering.
Right.
And in the process, muddying the whole exercise, which, of course, leads to very confusing situations stateside and so on. In situations where, like this year, there were not enough people policing the stage, that sort of thing slips through very, very easily. It takes, and they're very artful. You have to look closely at the pass to see whether or not it's one of the legitimate passes.
Yes, and I mean, it's not just that they're using these fraudulent passes, but it's also that sometimes they're not even pretending to be doing something of worth. Sometimes they're just going in there, the stormers, they have this trade secret where they say, well, I am from TV6 or I am from the Express. And, you know, on that basis, people just attempt to enter venues and so on.
On that point, let me just make a note, though. It's one of the interesting things about this process that the NCBA and the NCDF are making a fuss about people covering Carnival. But the most popular entities within those bodies, the Hearts, the Tribes, the Bliss, they have their own media phalanxes covering their band.
Right.
When that band crosses the stage, there'll be like 15 or 20 people calling themselves media for the band.
Right.
So they're recording video, they're recording stills, and that is exclusively for the band's use. So it's not as if they don't understand the value of the archiving, the news gathering, the collection of that information, and the repurposing it to their advantage. What I'm not understanding is why, if you understand the value of the process for yourself, why can't you understand it writ large across the whole of Carnival?
Right. And I suppose this is because the governing bodies for this Carnival festivity, all of the stakeholders, everybody is focused on how to monetize the product that we call Carnival. And so this is one of the avenues that many of these persons believe they're actually losing out on the income stream that they can take advantage of. But Andrea, I want to go back to the whole question of archiving and social media and the internet as a whole. When we put photographs on a website, when we email photographs to friends and family and so on, when we place photographs on Facebook or attach them to some tweet, aren't we essentially creating an archive in the process?
In a way, because Facebook now has, for example, Facebook has this timeline thing where you can go back and look at images that you placed years ago. But it's still not a proper archiving system for you know, your photographs. And a lot of times it's not really professional photos. It's just people who have their little camera phones and they take pictures or the little point and shoots and they take photographs. It's not images where you can actually use to promote Trinidad and Tobago's Carnival.
Right, correct.
You know, so it's a different kind of thing, you know. And if we have to archive, Mark and I have to archive our work, we would not. That's not the channel we will use to archive our work. It's a totally different system. So there's no real comparison.
It's chalk and cheese.
Yes, chalk and cheese. Yeah.
One basically is a very amateurish kind of archiving, and another one is, of course, a very professional approach to archiving, which I suppose for posterity is what we really require.
Exactly.
A very structured and professional way of archiving our material. Folks, we're going to take a very quick break and we'll be right back. We are looking at Morning Edition on TV6.
8 p.m. right here on TV6.
5 minutes before 7 o'clock, and we're talking about these intellectual property rights associated with Carnival images. And we have in studio Mr. Mark Lindsay, and we also have Andrea De Silva. Mark is a freelance photographer, he's a writer, he's a lecturer, and Andrea, she's a freelance photographer for Reuters. So we're trying to get a handle on whether or not there is money in photography. Generally speaking,
a whole other topic.
Hold on, wait. Generally speaking, is there money to be made in photography?
There's great satisfaction to be had in photography.
Yeah.
Right, and does that satisfaction come with an account balance?
It can if you apply yourself diligently over time and work on your skills.
So reporters, photographers who might be embedded in hotspot areas around the world and send to the world images. I mean, there's so many famous images of wars and famine and earthquakes and so on. Those photographers make a lot of money, don't they?
No, they don't.
No, they don't.
They don't?
No.
So how do they survive in this business?
They hope not to get killed.
And You got to, yeah, but you still have to live somewhere. You got to pay bills and so on. Mark, you're not helping me out, you know.
I wish
There has to be money somewhere. Somebody's hiding. Show me the money in this business. Where is it?
The one place I can assure you it is not is in Carnival coverage.
That's
Right.
for sure.
For sure.
You were talking about social media earlier, though, and one of the points I wanted to raise in that is that social media is, in fact, a remarkably effective distribution tool. It is an excellent way to get a large number of pictures distributed to a large group of pictures in a very short space of time. And I'm not entirely sure that we're making sufficient use of that. The other thing, of course, is that Carnival has more stakeholders than the NCC, the NCBA, TUCO, and Pantrin-Bago. There are at least 3 major stakeholders who have never been brought to any table to discuss anything. It's the masqueraders, a huge body of people who commit time, energy, and money into playing mass every year. The audience, the people we expect to turn up and actually look at the carnival.
Yes.
And then finally, there's the media, who are charged with distributing information and gathering news about the event.
Yes.
And these 3 bodies have never constituted any meaningful part of Carnival's deliberations.
Yes.
And in many ways, that's kind of why we have this problem. Because we have this situation where people who are seen as the Carnival stakeholders believe they're the only stakeholders in Carnival.
Yes.
And I think one thing that this issue has brought up is that we have rights, we have concerns, we have interests as well. The masqueraders who are asking where my money is, because they say, you're charging all this money, where's my money? Are
Right.
suddenly coming to the table and saying, you know, we are participants in this process as well.
But they are paying to play.
Yes.
Right.
So we are participants in this process in a meaningful financial way. And your costume is worth nothing until I wear it. I've actually seen this discussion crop up on social media networks. So when you start rolling down that road, it starts to have a lot of thumbtacks that you have to start avoiding. And it isn't until we have collaboration, discussion, and start thinking of ourselves as partners in a larger exercise, which is, of course, to make Carnival enormously popular, to make it vibrant again, to bring lots of people down here to see it and make it really a contender in the world stage, that you begin to see that sort of thing happening.
Yes. But why don't we just treat Carnival as one big industry value chain? And we identify exactly where along this chain are we actually creating value and therefore generating income, and then determine how that income should be shared amongst the people who are really the creators of that value. Isn't that the sensible approach?
The remarkable thing about that is that the people who have the best grasp of that as a concept are the people who are making the most fuss, which is the band leaders.
Right.
They understand the value chain problem. They are situation. They know what to give away. They know what to charge for. They know how to monetize. They know how to build customer service into their systems.
Right.
They know how to make people happy and spend their money.
Right.
So it is astonishing to me that they can't lift out of that and begin to apply it to the wider Carnival experience.
Okay.
That would be a start.
All right. Well, Andrea, I certainly do hope that between now and next Carnival, and I think next Carnival 2014 is in March, that we will resolve these issues.
I hope so too.
And you don't have to use any of your trade secrets to cover Carnival events ever again in Trinidad and Tobago.
Yeah, because I mean, I've covered carnivals, other carnivals, and other events in the Caribbean. I've never had to pay, you know, to
Exactly.
cover any events.
And we don't want you to pay.
I can assure
So-
you the Samba Drum is calling.
Yes, it is calling. Folks, we're going to take a quick break and come back with the 7 o'clock news. Remember, you are viewing Morning Edition on TV6.
Good morning. This is the